guys, welcome to a new lesson about C#, in which we will create our first project. You won't probably understand much looking at the codes right now, and they might look intimidating, but trust me, you don't have to worry about anything for the moment. In time, it will all become much more clearer. So, before we study the basic building blocks of a program, we first need to have a look at the bare minimum codes required to output a single sentence on the screen. This will also be the structure that we will take as a reference for the future lessons. So, that's it. That is the minimum structure of a C# program that can actually perform an action, in this case display some text on the screen. Just so you end up with almost the same codes, let's create our first C# project. Open Visual Studio and click on File, New Project. We are interested in only three things in this window. Select Visual C# as the language on the left panel, Console Application on the right one, and finally rename your project to Hello World. And done! We have our first project created. I know the interface may look intimidating with all the buttons and stuff, but to make it simple, again, we are only interested in just a few basic things. First of all, we are not going to create a GUI application. That is, we are not going to create a program with buttons, text fields, images, etc. We will create what's called a console application, and no, I'm not talking about game consoles, I'm talking about programs that interact with the user only via text input. We will also create programs with a graphical user interface at some point, but when we'll be comfortable enough with the codes. But for now, because we are creating console application, we are only interested in three parts of the Visual Studio interface: the main window, the Solution Explorer, and the Output console. As you can imagine, the main window is self-explanatory. This is where we will write the codes of our programs. Solution Explorer is the area where we can explore the files of our project, while the output is where we can see different stuff related to the way we perform our work, such as errors, warnings, etc., where we redirect relevant information in the process of debugging, etc. Now let's add a part that will display a sentence on the screen. As you can see, as soon as I start typing, Visual Studio will start displaying a list of available code options. This feature is called IntelliSense, and you will later understand that it's one of the most useful features of Visual Studio. Type exactly the same phrase that I typed, taking into account the character casing. When you are done, press the green button that looks like a play sign and say Start, or press the F5 key directly. At this point, Visual Studio will try to compile our program, meaning it will try to convert the instructions into machine code, but it will generate an error instead. This is because I deliberately left out a piece of the instruction specifically to generate an error. You can now see that Visual Studio offers us information about our errors in three different places. First, the Output panel, and this is the most important area when it comes to identifying errors and even showing some hints related to ways of correcting them. As a beginner, the first thing you will notice is that the compiler errors are very cryptic and academic. You will not understand much of them at first sight. However, it will get easier with time and experience. Second place, indicating our error, is the little wavy-like red line found under the problematic instruction. The last spot where we can notice that we have an error is directly on a scrolling bar, where we will notice a red square. If we scroll to that square, we will get to the line that generates the error. Now let's go and correct our error, or bug. This process is called debugging. Adds the semicolon character at the end of the instruction as the compiler suggests. Press Start again, and this time you will see your program being compiled and ran without errors. However, You notice that it self-closed in a blink of an eye, and actually this is normal behavior for the console programs. They tend to close themselves up as soon as they finish their execution unless we specifically tell them to wait for some input from our behalf, like pressing a key. So, let's add such an instruction and tell it not to close, but to wait for our input. And there you go! We just created the first program in our programming career. Congratulations! In the next lesson, we will analyze the structure of the program we wrote today. Until then, bye!